How's it going, male and females? It's me, Spectral here, and I'm feeling better than I have in a long while. For the last, I feel like month and a month and a half, I've been on again, on off again, sick. I've been suffering from insomnia, and last night was the first night that I actually got a real good night's rest of sleep. I actually feel pretty decent, and so I'm recording a video finally again. Thank you guys for the support on the last couple videos. It means the world to me. And we're still bright and early in 2025, and we got some exciting news in the gaming world. So, SteamOS, if you don't know what it is, it was developed by Valve for their upcoming, or no longer upcoming, it's been out for a couple years. Their Steam Decks. They're portable PCs in your hands that you can play on the go. And as much as I want one, I can't necessarily afford it right now, but the Steam Decks are pretty impressive piece of software, and just hardware in general, where you can play basically your Windows library or your Steam library on to go, and it works perfectly fine if you're willing to settle with some less resolution and a little bit less performance that you would on your actual gaming PC. But listen, if you're willing to compromise with that, you got a more than capable gaming machine that can play basically almost any game using Proton, the compatibility layer. And the exciting news is that Steam OS, which is based off of Arch Linux, is finally coming to Lenovo Legion Go, which basically signals to me that Valve is actually wanting to push Proton and SteamOS and the idea of Linux gaming further, because it gives more ways for more people to play these games. I've known a handful of Linux users that have been using Linux for 10 plus years, and they're finally able to start playing PC games again because they're being given the option. It's not perfect. We'll get to that in a few moments. But right now, believe it or not, this is a huge deal for gamers like me and the many other PC users who value healthy competition. The more choice, the better, because that means companies are going to be forced to make better products. And eventually, I believe within the next 10, maybe 15 years, that Linux will at least get more of a hold in the marketplace. Now, I don't believe for a second that they're ever going to hold my hair's a freaking mess. They're ever going to hold a significant market share, more than Mac or Windows. But maybe one day, Windows will be forced to realize, hey, there's actual competition, and we need to stop doing some stupid stuff. So if we rewind back in history, back in the 80s and 90s, three operating systems basically came to the world. We had your Windows, you had your Macintoshes, and you had your Linux. Now, Windows basically dominated everything. Mac OS basically it's a pretty good size thing, and there's a reason why people choose Mac over Windows. It's super reliable. It has hardware and software combined, which it's very crazy what Mac OS can do if you're in the Mac ecosystem. It's very good. I had a MacBook for a couple years and I enjoyed it. And then there was Linux, that was basically lurking in the shadows, making everything work. Because if you don't know, Linux basically runs the world. Every major server, from YouTube to Netflix or anything really, even Microsoft Azure is built off of a Linux server. And what it does is it basically just, like I said, it makes the world work. A Linux just is very much more customized, has more customizability. It's a very secure platform, and you can basically make it your own and do what you need to do and call it good. Besides that, there was 7 or 10 people who actually were brave enough to set up as a desktop, and that basically paved the way for what Linux desktops look like today. But Windows has basically dominated the marketplace, and for the most part, it's earned that spot. I would argue for most of the time it's been alive. I started on Windows XP on my papa's computer back in 2003, and I basically taught myself everything I know about computers starting from that point till the day. And then from Windows XP around 2009, 10, I got my first laptop to have Windows 7 on it. It was mine. And I loved Windows 7. I liked the aesthetics of it. It worked perfectly fine for all things that a 10-year-old boy needed. And then there was a dumpster fire that was Windows 8/8.1. Now, I was a young lad. I wasn't really learning about IT, but basically everything I've heard from Windows 8 was stay away from it from a 10-foot pole. It was god awful. Microsoft was doing some dumb things. And then we landed on Windows 10 as a society, and Microsoft was like, this is the final Windows edition. And we know that's not true, but honestly, I really love Windows 10. I think it has the right amount of customizability and basically being controlled and handheld by Microsoft, saying they know it best. But basically, Windows 10 worked basically out of the box. You can just download whatever you needed on it. It worked. There wasn't too much configuration on the end user side. And it was just a heck of a time all around. But then came along Windows 11 and it ruined everything. Now, don't get me wrong, Windows 11 is a fine piece of software for regular end users, your grandmothers, your grandfathers, people who aren't that technologically savvy. And overall, it's just it's a pretty great operating system. I won't downplay what Microsoft has done. I think Windows 11 it's pretty good for the most part. There are some deal breakers for me, and these are my opinions, and you can feel how you feel about your own operating systems. There's just some things that I'm very frustrated about with Windows 11. First off, Windows 11 mandates that you have a Microsoft account before setting up your profile. I think that's the dumbest thing ever. Even Apple doesn't even do this. Like, you can set up like any Mac device and not have an Apple account. Now, granted, helps a lot if you have an Apple account, and I don't see why not. And kind of the same thing, I don't see why you necessarily would just say no to a Microsoft account because it's free. But the fact that it's mandated, and I think that's what bothers me the most, is I hate when things are mandated. It just kind of makes me want to fight against it. But there's no way around it. On Windows 10, from every Windows 10 install I've ever done, you can just skip that nonsense. You don't have to have a Microsoft account. And sure, every once in a while, you'll get the notification saying, hey, sign in. You'll get some pretty nice features if you do. And you at least had the choice on Windows 10 to get rid of it. But on Windows 11, you're stuck with it. And the UI, I think the UI is kind of atrocious. I wish there was more customizability. I hate how the settings layout works compared to 10. I hate how things are hidden. Like, if you're a Windows 11 IT person and you're trying to troubleshoot a printer, God bless you, because it's not necessarily a fun time. I hate that things are just hidden in the settings. I hate it. I hate when I search for something. It's more times than not, I'll search for like display, and next thing I get sent to like a Edge Bing. And as much as Bing is a good product now, and I can recommend Bing if you're just wanting to use some internet browsing, I hate the fact that it's so pushed on me that I don't have the choice to turn it off, and you can't uninstall it. And Windows 11 has a lot of bloatware. Some of it you just can't uninstall, and it's awful. And then there's also the AI obsession that Microsoft is pushing, like Copilot and this like AI screenshotting tool, or like this video tool. I can't remember. I looked into it a while ago, but they basically removed it because of the outlash. But basically, it was going to constantly record your screen, and somehow through that you could like go back in time and image your computer from that point in time. Now listen, if I wanted a time machine, I'd just download a time machine app and back up my stuff that way. And I already back up all my stuff. I back up basically through every different cloud service, and it's not actually that expensive. But it's just how I keep things backed up, and if I need to reinstall an OS, it's not that big of a deal. And I love AI. AI is here to stay, and it's very useful. I use ChatGPT every day. I just don't want Microsoft's version of ChatGPT, because that's basically what it is. They invested a lot of money in ChatGPT, and they took ChatGPT and said it's Copilot now. I don't want the Microsoft shoving their version down my throat. It's not as useful as ChatGPT from what I've seen of it. So this brought me to like around the summertime when I started looking for alternatives. I thought about switching back to macOS, but after the end of the day, no matter how much I will praise Apple products, is that I don't have the customization that I would want. I can't build my own Mac. Well, you can. It's not. I'll explain that later. But like, I can't build my own PC and put Macintosh on it natively. It just won't work. So then I started looking at Linux as a possible solution. I started watching a lot of videos on how Linux is basically gaining a lot of foothold when it comes to gaming, programming, basic internet utilities, and all these cool little pieces of software. So I chose Arch Linux, and if you don't know anything about Arch Linux, I basically preach it all the time. It's like a thing at my work, like a running joke that I am basically like being paid by Arch Linux to advertise it because I love Arch Linux a lot. The reason why I love it is I have total control over my machine. There's no bloatware because I only install what I need. There's no unwanted apps, no worry about location trackers, no worry about anything. It's a clean, customizable experience. I customized everything from how my desktop like just looks in general, how my lock screen works, how I can boot into my computer. I have Grub running as my boot manager, so I can quickly switch between SSDs on a restart. I can customize how my layout looks. If I want to, I can make my desktop look exactly like Windows XP and be pretty darn happy. It's fully what I want, and I only installed what I wanted on it because you start with a simple terminal and you build everything from there. And there's tools like Arch install that works pretty well for just quickly getting things up and running. And the best part is, because I'm a huge gamer, gaming just works out of the box nowadays. It used to be like 4 or 5 years ago where some games just wouldn't work. And the games that do, there would be like a 3 month buffer between when they were actually playable. But Valve, God bless them, because they invest so much into Proton and SteamOS that you can basically game as smoothly as I could on Windows. I can boot up Marvel Rivals and like day one, and even now, it works even better than Windows appliance because Linux by nature uses less resources. So I have no problem booting these games up and playing them perfectly fine. And I'm really hoping SteamOS becomes available to like install on a desktop, like actually, instead of doing like some of the weird janky ways I've seen people do it. And the day that happens, I'm moving to SteamOS, which SteamOS is based off of Arch Linux anyway. Now, let's take a breather and let's be real for a moment. Linux in no way is completely perfect. I wish it was. I wish that I could say that Linux has everything you will ever need in life and you'll never have to touch Windows or Mac OS again. But the reality is that Windows has me under such Stockholm Syndrome that I can't break free from it, dang it. As much as I've been wanting to break free from Windows, I still need it. Actually, like I have Windows VMs running on my computer almost all the time for different things like editing software. It's how I do my day job when I'm working from home, like I am today. And I can't get rid of it no matter how much I try, and no matter how much Linux enthusiasts will say I'll never need Windows or Mac again. I still need it. And if you work in IT, you're still going to need to use Windows and Mac OS all the time. And for gamers, there's a hard truth. There's some games that just won't work on Linux. Titles like Fortnite, your Call of Duty, your Rainbow Six Siege, and your GTA Online rely on anti-cheat systems that don't play nice with Linux. Despite most of the anti-cheats have support for Linux, but it's up to the developer to enable it. And they have their reasons for not enabling it, because despite it having functionality under anti-cheat, it's not the same level they're comfortable with. And I'm really hoping with SteamOS, as pointed out by some ordinary gamer, that maybe through SteamOS, they Valve can really like say we control the kernel. So maybe in the next couple of years we could see that happening. But that's only exclusive on Windows. Now I have a Windows 11 Pro version on a second SSD that's just 1 TB that I have exclusively for these like games that I can't play on Linux. Now you can make fun of me if you want because I have to boot into a whole other system, but like it's just what I got to do because as much as I want to only be on Linux, I still have to use Windows because gosh dang, that Stockholm Syndrome has me very tightly gripped around the throat. So for basically everything else that I use, need Windows for that's outside of gaming, on either Linux or just having to boot in the second SSD, I actually have a version of Windows 10 on this computer that's actually not activated. I can't get an activation code working on this VM for whatever reason, but it doesn't prohibit me from using the system because I can still remote into work. I can still open up Fedora Wondershare, and it's going to work perfectly fine. It has basically how I built my virtual machine is that it has no idea that it's actually a virtual machine. Now, granted, if a piece of software looked hard enough, they would realize I'm running drivers to make Windows basically experience. But this machine has no idea that it's not the main operating system for the most part. It runs perfectly well. I've been able to video edit it on it. And you may be going, really, Filmora? You're not using like Adobe or DaVinci Resolve? First thing, screw Adobe with a burning passion. I don't like Adobe. I mean, Adobe software is awesome. Just Adobe as the business is awful. And DaVinci Resolve actually works natively on Linux. It's just, like I said, like most people will tell you if you're using DaVinci, it's used for like studio level stuff. Like it's a very intensive program. There's a lot to learn about it, and I haven't figured it out yet. I can't get basic things working. Not because the program's bad, it's just because I'm dumb when it comes to learning it. Now, switching over to Linux from Windows, there are some things that I recommend. One, if you don't know how to use Linux, I recommend watching a video because if you mess something up on Linux, you're going to mess up your host operating system. So my idea is use something like Linux Mint, and I'll show you just in a moment. on a virtual machine, get your feel for it before you fully commit to it. And if you don't know what you're doing, just stop right there and try doing some more research. It's better to do more research before you could fully commit to something. But I fully recommend most people, if you know what you're doing and you're a little bit tech savvy, and you're willing to say, you know what, I'm kind of enough with Microsoft trying to dictate how I use my operating system, and you're willing to put in the work and make the switch, it's worth it. Now, what operating system do you use when it comes to Linux? There's Arch, Fedora, Ubuntu, Debian, Linux Mint. Now, I like Arch Linux. It works the best for me, but it's not for everyone. For starters, I recommend Linux Mint. It's what I got started back when I started messing around with Linux for IT back in 2018, 2019. It works perfectly fine. And all you're going to do, you're going to come to the Linux Mint website, and you're just going to click download, and you're going to download Cinnamon. It's all you need. We're perfectly. It's just going to download as an ISO. The one thing I do recommend is for downloading, the quickest one that I found is from James Madison University. Anyone else could work fine, but like originally I was trying Clarkson University and I had like a 7 hour download, which is ridiculous because I have a 1 gigabit download and 1 gigabit upload. But once that downloads, if you just want to try it out and not use a virtual machine, you can grab yourself like a USB like this, plug in your computer, download Belina Etcher, and just flash it to your flash drive, plug it in, boot it up, select the USB for your BIOS, or in your BIOS settings or your boot manager, and you can boot into it into a live environment, and I'll show you what that looks like. So here we are in the Linux Mint live environment. So basically what live means, it's just running off the USB you plugged in or on the virtual machine. It's not installed in any actual hard drive. So you're not necessarily needing to worry about going over your your hard drive for Windows. You can do it. You can test it out. You can open up Firefox here, and you can browse the internet, and like literally everything works perfectly fine as it was an actual drive. Now, if you go through the research and you decide you want to install Linux Mint, like I recommend if you're starting on Linux, what I actually would recommend more is having 2 SSDs or 2 hard drives and installing Linux on the second hard drive and just dual booting in between. But if you're ready, all you have to do is click install, and you're just going to select English, and it's very simple. It's just like Windows. You're going to hit continue. You're going to install the multimedia codec, which basically allows you to play video formats perfectly fine. You're just going to accept. And Linux Mint is based off of Ubuntu, which in itself is based off of Debian, which is something that if you're going to use Linux, you want to use a distro that is widely used, widely supported, and I'm not worried about Linux Mint ever going away because how widely used it is. And so if you're going to completely just get rid of Windows, you're just going to erase entire disk and install Linux Mint. If you have 2 SSDs, you can partition and do that, but this is running on a virtual machine, and so I'm not really worried about it messing up anything. So we can just hit install now. And Chicago's fine. And this is where you can just set up your user profile. We'll just call it Dakota, which is my name. Dakota's fine. Choose a password. Just make it super secured. And that should be fine. Require my password to log in. Create my home file. We don't need to do any of that. We're just going to copy the files, and it's just going to install. Okay, so basically after the installation, your computer is going to have to restart, just go through the steps, and now we can enter our password. And we are now officially in Linux Mint. Close that off. And it's going to say, welcome to Linux Mint. You got some cool stuff. You can now basically do whatever the crap you want on it. So the first thing you're probably going to be like is, where do I get these apps? So like, let's say I don't have Google Chrome. Oh yeah, so you just open up Firefox here, and we can just go to Google Chrome download, and we can download it from here. But Linux is pretty cool in the sense that just like your phone Apple Store or Google Play Store, there is a simple store that we can go to here. So if we go to, gosh, what is it called? Apps, Software Manager. Basically, everything you're going to need can be found in the Software Manager. So we need Chrome. And would you look at that? We can go ahead and hit the install on Google Chrome. All we have to do is enter our password. We hit authenticate, and it's just going to install. And after a few seconds, would you look at that? We can just click Chrome, and we have a Chromium web browser based just straight off of the. So once you learn basically how to update stuff, you can now actually use ChatGPT to actually install stuff like Steam. So you can do sudo apt install Steam, and it's going to find the package. You're just going to hit Y, and it's going to download. And look at all this hacker nonsense stuff. It's nothing too important. It's just installing the software. And it looks like we're almost done. Yep, progress. So what it's basically doing is basically all Linux distros use a package manager. If you use Linux Mint, that's based off of Ubuntu, based off of Debian, you're going to use apt. If you're using, I think like Fedora, you're going to be using something like Yum. I think that's right. I never really used Fedora before. But if you're using Arch, you're going to be using Pacman. So you're basically just going to let this thing do its business. It's going to install Steam all willy-nilly. And would you look at that? We got our Steam up and running. I can sign into that and we're perfectly fine. All I have to do is configure Proton to basically be the thing that runs the games. And that's all you need to learn. There's plenty of tutorials out there about the more in-depth about Linux Mint or Linux. Well, basically, this is an entry-level way to get into Linux. And if you're willing to put in the work, and willing to say enough to Windows is nonsense, you can have a pretty great experience. So as Linux kind of continues getting more of a bit of a foothold, I really think we're going to see a lot more developers actually, start pushing things for Linux. We got Valve, which is doing amazing work. DaVinci, the fact that that runs on Linux as well as it does, that I've seen some people use it, is really impressive. Most all single-player games are coming and working day one thanks to Proton. And I truly believe with SteamOS becoming a bit more widely used, hopefully maybe Valve can go to these developers and say, hey, we can develop a thing specifically just for SteamOS that would basically allow them to either somehow be more compatible with Proton when it comes to their anti-cheats. And maybe we could see some multiplayer games like Call of Duty come to Linux. It would be a pretty cool thing. And Linux is not for everyone, but I really believe that if you give it a try, it's going to be pretty good. But really, as for me personally, is I'm probably going to still be using Windows primarily alongside Linux because I can't just get rid of it as much as I want to. But, maybe one day I'll finally escape the clutches of Windows. But until then, I'm going to keep tinkering and gaming and fighting for the good fight for fairness and competition. But that's basically going to do it for today. Thank you guys for watching, and if you learned something, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It helps out the channel, and we'll see you guys in the next video.